who will vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they are victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it. That it's an entitlement, and government should give it to them. And they will vote for this president no matter what. And I mean, the president starts off with 48, 49, 40, he starts off with a huge number. These are people who pay no income tax. 47% of Americans pay no income tax. So our message of low taxes doesn't connect. And he'll be out there talking about tax cuts for the rich. I mean, that's what they sell every 4 years. And so my job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them that they should take personal responsibility and care for their lives. What I have to do is convince the 5 to 10% in the center that are independent, that are thoughtful, that look at voting one way or the other depending upon, in some cases, emotion, whether they like the guy or not.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. I'm Michael Brooks. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn Left is Best headquarters with super producer Matt Leck, super producer David Slavic. He's holding it down in the Discord, in Twitter, scanning the Michael Brooks Show-averse. David Griscom is here. I don't know if he's on mic yet. We're working towards it. We'll see when he gets out of his shell. He is our resident writer, theoretician, and researcher. On today's program, Mike Hanna from Al Jazeera, global correspondent. We're going to be talking about Zimbabwe, the broader implications for Southern Africa, and what it means when a dictator leaves and potentially another one takes his place. Then Jade Hoye. There's going to be a little bit of tension in the room because he is, like Matt, a super producer. He's a super producer for Leverage the Chat. He's also a super producer for my homie, my comrade, my dear friend, Waz, for Waz Speaks. Jade and I are going to be talking sneakers, Kyrie on Twitter, how to cover basketball, and he is my best conspiracy theory friend, the smart, friendly Alex Jones. All on tonight's Michael Brooks Show. North Korea tested missiles today, launched an ICBM. The sun is out showing the dad. We'll get to that later on the program. But first, today's opening commentary relates to that vintage moment of Mitt Romney, who has rebranded himself in the degraded standards #resistance age as the woke plutocrat Mormon, because he does things like recognize that rape and racism are unacceptable. And I can commend him for that. But God, our standards have really degraded, huh? That Mitt Romney, a embodiment of all of the worst impulses of the plutocratic elite that guide the Republican Party and all too much of the Democratic Party, could be praised in today's political context. And I bring that up because there are two things that are happening right now with regards to our modern politics, our top-down class warfare that defines today's Republican Party, that is embodied and extended by the infamous 47% video that sunk Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential prospects. First, the gutting of net neutrality. Net neutrality is under attack. And let me just explain net neutrality for everybody so it's really, really simple what net neutrality is. I'm going to quote now from Victor Pickard. Net neutrality protections are essentially safeguards that protect internet service providers, ISPs, from interfering with the internet. Net neutrality gives the FCC the regulatory authority to prevent ISPs like Comcast and Verizon from slowing down or blocking certain types of content. It also prevents them from offering what's known as paid prioritization, where an ISP could let particular websites or content creators pay more for faster streaming and download times. With paid prioritization, ISP could shake down a company like Netflix or an individual website owner, coercing them to pay more in order for it to be moved on a faster lane. Net neutrality often gets treated as a sort of technocratic squabble over ownership and control of internet pipes, but in fact, it speaks to the core of the social contract between government, corporations, and the public. What it really comes down to is how can members of the public obtain information and services and express themselves creatively and politically without interference from massive corporations. What this is, and this is according to a very, very basic Marxist understanding. This is an enclosure of the commons. The Internet Commons, which was a publicly funded utility, which allowed for the creation of a hybrid market and commons economy, is now being re-engineered by government to serve basically as a giant cash cow for corporations like Verizon and Comcast. This graphic will give you a sense of what the internet age might look like if the Trump administration's plans and the FCC under Ajit Pai continue to move forward in their mad rush to give more money and resources to internet service providers and block innovation and creation on the internet. Higher bills for you, slower stream times, and all going to some of the worst companies in the world's pockets. And this is just crude accumulation. This is the first wave of how a market works. There's always a commons resource. There's always something that is community developed and community developed. Maybe it's some version of a hybrid system where markets contribute, where government's the foundation, and where communities and the commons evolve something. Now it's going to be privately enclosed to create profit for incumbent legacy corporations that pay off Washington and exploit the public interest. This is happening in line with a massive tax giveaway scheme that is moving fast through the Republican Congress. This is the core Republican agenda. Make America poorer, sicker, and dumber. And it works together. It works together to enclose a commons, give a giant giveaway to corporations, and then design a tax bill whose primary benefits will be top-end earners and private corporations. The New York Times says the far-reaching tax bill, now like the one being considered, would touch nearly every American and every business, small and large. There are proposals that it could affect how much it costs for you to buy a house, care for a sick relative, adopt a child, and send the children to private school. As with any tax bill, there are winners and losers. Many households would pay less in taxes, but some would pay more, including about 13 million middle-class families, according to an estimate by the Joint Committee on Taxation. This also is going to involve massive corporate tax cuts and even increases for people like graduate students. Now, here's another way that these plans intersect. Check out this incredibly embarrassing clip from Fox News's ever-embarrassing Jesse Waters talking to a seemingly kind of, not particularly thrilled child who's on to talk about taxes. I hope when he is hopefully a normal and successful college student, no one digs this clip up and embarrasses him. But everybody involved in this should be called on at least some type of sort of weird conservative obsession with child wonderkins, which is another one of the many, many bizarre pathologies of the conservative movement. This is a kid explaining to Jesse Waters, who made his career off of harassing people on the street for Bill O'Reilly, why we need to pass a tax plan that will benefit the plutocrats of this country. This is pretty bizarre.
Tell me why you think lowering taxes is good economic policy.
I think lowering taxes would be better because right now our taxes are too high and they're way, way too high, and it has to stop. Trump's been talking a lot about lowering taxes, and Obama and they made the taxes go higher.
Yep.
Which probably didn't help. And right now there's taxes on everything, like free education. Who's going to pay for that? Taxes, all these other things. What's going to pay for that? Taxes. So I think our taxes need to be lowered a lot.
All right. And
I would pay for it starting by taxing every single piece of money and holdings that Jesse Waters has at 100%, making him homeless, and kicking all of that money to free colleges, but one of many examples. Also, if the Department of Social Services still exists in the Republican governance age, can we call it on that kid's parents, Jesse Waters and the Fox News booking department? But this all works together. The attack on net neutrality, which is an attack fundamentally on, in fact, freedom, innovation, and information, is going to facilitate the type of coverage you saw just there, because incumbent corporations, cable service providers, ones with the money, influence, and access, will have clear lanes to give you propaganda videos like a child in a Trump hat explaining to you why we need to pass top-end tax giveaways for the already hopelessly dysfunctionally rich in a society defined by extreme inequality. And then it will loop around, because the tax giveaways and cuts on corporations will create even more capital to reinvest in the political process in Washington to strip away and destroy the very last vestiges of the American safety net and enclose more commons to create more profits. Republicans look at this, and the right looks at this systemically. The Koch brothers, the Republican strategists, Grover Norquist, they see a complete synchronization between assaults on the public sector, tax giveaways, paring down the American state, and redistribution of wealth to the top. It involves packing the courts, which the Trump administration is doing incredibly effectively. It involves getting rid of the open pipelines on the internet, and it involves a generation-defining, inequality-increasing tax giveaway. This is another failure of neoliberalism. Neoliberals don't think structurally. They think in a piecemeal way. These guys don't, which is part of the reason why they're unending assaults on most Americans have been so effective. So look, we need to keep fighting against the net neutrality gutting by the FCC. We need to go up against this tax cut. It's about to pass, and this is just as damaging in many respects as gutting Obamacare. It's generation-defining next wave of inequality and top-down class warfare, and we need to think structurally, because the continuum of getting rid of net neutrality, tax giveaways to the rich, and that kid talking to that troglodyte, Jesse Waters, is all part of a continuum that is destroying our politics, our economics, our media, and cultural lives. It's time we take notice, fight back in an integrative way, and reclaim the commons, and also save that kid's future dating and social life. Now, and I'm really serious about that, I would never, ever, I mean, could you imagine if we built content? And now after that, I'm going to have an 8-year-old on to explain what's happening in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's what the hell? That kid should be like playing baseball, not talking to Jesse Waters. I mean, I don't know what Jesse Waters does.
Jesse Waters should be playing baseball too, to be fair.
Softball.
Yeah.
T-ball.
T-ball.
Exactly. Jesse Waters can't handle anything at high velocity, including, I mean, that kid left him in the dust just doing competent talking points. On today's show, we're talking with Mike Hanna, Zimbabwe, the greater South Africa situation, and so on. Actually, we're going to do the shout-out first, then we'll do the rundown. So as we know, now we do the shout-out, where we talk about something positive, much to David Grisham's discomfort. He is not a believer in positivity. He thinks it's he calls it the Tony Robbins section of the show, disdainfully. Matt insists that he doesn't care, and David Slavic goes, I like Tony Robbins. So it's a very interesting dynamic here. But today's shout-out comes courtesy of A Peace and Open Democracy in the gender, sexuality, and social justice vertical. The whole thing is crazy. Every time you say that, you got to do a Jordan Peterson voice. Next, now they'll be covering how... I'm going to just go into this shout-out in the Jordan Peterson voice. Oh my God, there's a cafe in India where women are supporting each other who've been victims of acid attacks. The whole thing is anti-male, PC, run amok. It's neo-Marxism, and it's crazy. That's right. In the there is the Cafe Shiros in Agra, India, is run by survivors of acid attacks. This is actually a really, really disturbing story that turns into something that is actually inspiring. Girls and women who were attacked by male stalkers, jilted lovers, relatives, fathers, or husbands, relatives or fathers are serving hot drinks and working as chefs. In one corner, a t-shirt reads, "Stop acid attacks, and my beauty is my smile are for sale." Those who work here support a broader campaign for gender equality and for a public places without women fearing of violence and other forms of attack. And the article goes on to explain very disturbingly how much of a problem in India, in fact, disfiguring acid attacks are on women, but also the community effort that these women have built at Cafe Shiros. And the author says, my conversation with the woman at Cafe Shiros suggested that many acid attackers and perpetuators go unpunished by offering bribes or using their own influence to circumvent laws. And they can explain that justice can only come from the creation of spaces where they feel socially included by the wider community and from reinforcement of government laws. They demanded a greater focus on prevention rather than crisis response, and they expressed gratitude that they may continue with their lives in the cafe. Their ongoing struggle for equality reveals the real face of India. It's a really, heartbreaking, disturbing, and just grotesque story on one hand, but also incredible resilience and real bottom-up admirable social activism and innovation on the other. That is today's shout out, and I think there was enough disturbing content in it for David Grisham. Don't shake your head at me. You know I'm right. Don't shake your head at your leather jacket coming in from Austin trying to be all Johnny Cash. How dare you. We are at 850 patrons. I want to thank each and every one of you so much. Now, what happens at the end of the month is there's always a drop-off. People's cards get declined. There's other sort of things that arise. So please make sure your information's up to date on Patreon. If you're hanging on the fence, now is definitely the time to do it. People at the 21 and above level have been doing the phone calls, and now we're actually designing some more specific series that we've been talking about of calls that are going to be training sessions. Those are going to go to 2 a month. The voicemails are being put together at the 31 and above for the new year. We're putting those together right now as we speak. You're going to have about 4 or 5 different characters that you can choose from, and we will deliver you those impressions. The Discord is humming. It's an incredible curated system now, thanks to our admins, and I'm doing regular Q&As on there. We just had one the other night. We're going to do another one Thursday evening. The iTunes have 165 reviews, I believe. The numbers are growing. It really profoundly helps when you spread the word. One piece of news I want to give you: when we get to 1,000, Matt and I are going to stream Wolfenstein, and we're also going to work a little bit with an animator to do some animations of some of the characters and impressions, and some of that will, of course, just be for patrons. We take care of our patrons here, and we appreciate each and every one of you so much. Of course, the show, each episode of the Michael Brooks Show is available in full on YouTube. All of the bonus content. This weekend's Illicit History is on the real Sosa from Scarface, the Bolivian cocaine boom, pre-Pablo Escobar, the role of the CIA, paramilitaries, death squads, Nazis, and how it led to the Iran-Contra affair. Last Sunday, Natalie Shore explained why we don't have single-payer healthcare in America. It goes back to a 1940s PR campaign by the American Medical Association. Plus, you get the post-game. Tonight, Leslie Hill III's calling in. We're talking for a few minutes. He's from the great show Struggle Session, which everybody should check out. And then I am going to wreck Jordan B. Peterson because the whole thing is crazy. And Right Wing Mandela is going to be responding to some Morning Joe clips, plus your calls and IMs. We're moving. I want to thank each and every one of you so much. Let's cross 1,000 by the end of the new year. And we will be back in a moment with Mike Hanna. We're talking Zimbabwe and Southern Africa.
I'm a slap one in your face. What do you? Me no take intimidation. For me the little boy, me no fear man. And me we make to live up on this station. Come on, come and up your mother. Feel so your bad take for me round rubber. Two boots of each hand, this is randada. You bright on your face, do you think like grabber? Don't make me go a dead of the end of a link fagger. When me say ready, you can't say you can't bother. The chatty business, me left that to ragga. So me rise up the thing, them well longer than a ladder. Come me no in a chatting, no yapping, no flipping, no flapping. Me strapping, fi clapping, me last them fi chopping. Me tricking, me chopping, the rifle them whopping. Him run but them dropping, him choking, him gapping. People are run out, but what happened? Them run back inside when more shots start attacking. The K-long like wicked, and when that start batting, them about Jesus Christ, Holy Ghost could not block him. Me a real bad man, me a tell the pussy them again, me no pretend. I me no bad alone pon the weekend. Say them a chat about them, gonna beat them. How I do them? Me a real bad man, me a tell the pussy them again, me no pretend. From inna the beginning till the world end. Some boy young go bad in front of them girlfriend, but me no soft like cherry. This a no cartoon and no Tom and no Jerry. Me call Sheba the criminal secretary. Make the pin touch the wings, smaddy go a cemetery. The pin me a talk, no in a no blackberry. That the firing pin we in a the blackberry top. Boy dress up in a black February. This me in a Christmas, nothing na merry. Come no in a chatting, no yapping, no flipping, no flapping. Me strapping, fi clapping, me last them fi chopping. Me tricking, me chopping, the rifle them whopping. Him run but them dropping, him choking, him gapping. People are run out.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Vibes Cartel to take us in. Joining us now is Mike Hanna. He is a correspondent for Al Jazeera, news presenter, analyst. He was former CNN Jerusalem bureau chief. Mike, and if I could presume, I would like to say senior foreign correspondent for the Michael Brooks Show.
Indeed, yes, Michael. Nice to be back.
It's great to have you. I really appreciate your time as always. And we're going to start. We're talking about Zimbabwe. We covered it a bit last week. There's a significant transition happening now. Let's play just a brief piece of sound from Emerson Mnangagwa. I think I am 85% there in pronunciation of his a section from his inaugural speech from last week, and then he is, of course, replacing Robert Mugabe, and then you will take us from there, Mike.
I will protect and promote the rights of the people of Zimbabwe, and that I will devote myself to the well-being of Zimbabwe and its people.
Mike, who is this figure that has replaced Robert Mugabe, and how did this whole process come about, and what can we expect from him?
Well, the key issue, Michael, is that Emerson Mnangagwa worked under Robert Mugabe as a liberation fighter, as a politician, as a state security officer for more than 50 years. So he is more than an acolyte. He is a devoted follower, has been, and was a person who probably more than any other single individual within Zimbabwe kept Robert Mugabe in power for such a long period of time. So he's a deeply significant figure. And the fact that he has now come to power raises questions, many delighted at the final end of the Mugabe era, but many still asking questions about a man who has been so deeply embedded in the ethos of Robert Mugabe and the way in which Robert Mugabe kept control of the country for such a period of time, whether indeed he can deliver the democracy that he's promised at his inauguration speech.
Is he that another thing that people should be aware of, and maybe you can give us a brief intro to some of these figures as well, is that, this coup, and it is, I think, appropriate to call it that, maybe a desirable coup, but certainly a coup, showed that in the end, Zimbabwe was not a one-man state. It was more of a one-party state, or potentially a military state in some respects. But there has also been a very active and at times very sophisticated opposition to Zimbabwe. Morgan Tsvangirai, as an example, led a presidential campaign several years ago against Robert Mugabe that many people, in fact, think that Morgan Tsvangirai won, and Mugabe put down along with figures like Emerson very violently. Is he reaching out to figures like Morgan Tsvangirai, and what is the state of the opposition in modern Zimbabwe?
Well, to put it bluntly, there is no opposition in modern Zimbabwe. The opposition that we've seen, even in the time of Morgan Tsvangirai, the most significant opposition came from those who split from ZANU-PF, the ruling party, Robert Mugabe's party, a party which emerged as well from a degree of mergers over a period of time. And what has got to be understood, though, is the structure that kept that party in place, a party that is still in place, that still has utter dominance, and no doubt is likely to have utter dominance when elections come. The structures that kept it in place are a myriad. Certainly, the military control is absolutely central to it. The military played a major role in propping up Robert Mugabe through all those years, led by people like Emerson Mnangagwa. But one must also remember that this coup, as it is labeled, happened because the head of the Zimbabwean army, General Chiwenga, is an old comrade of Emerson Mnangagwa. He made a choice about the splits that were happening within ZANU-PF between Robert Mugabe's ordained successor, which was his wife, Grace Mugabe, and Emerson Mnangagwa, who'd been there for so many decades, who had always been considered to be the prince in waiting. So to understand Zimbabwe, to understand that the possibility of an opposition, as others might see it, is not really a viable option. The way things work there, and the way things will work even in a democratic society, is a splintering yet again of that ruling political movement, ZANU-PF. The way things change is for ZANU-PF itself to change. Similarities that we might get into in a little while just across the border in South Africa, where the ANC has the same kind of standing as a party like ZANU-PF, parties emerging from a liberation struggle into total control of the states which they govern, with a democratic veneer of democratic governance applied over the whole structure. Certainly Zimbabwe very different, given the massive military infrastructure that was at play in keeping Robert Mugabe in power. The question once again now is that military structure going to go along with promises of real democratic reform? Real democratic reform means that each and every ZANU-PF member has to accept the primacy of the ballot box when elections happen, not only presidential elections, but obviously state elections, regional elections. These are the key times when people will make their choices about their leaders, who will lead them in the community, who will lead them as state in the state. But those decisions are not made necessarily on a party basis. They are made by a country that is largely, and has been, majority ZANU-PF supporters. The question is to what degree they will accept the concept in which the leader of the country and the government of a country will be brought about by legal, unfettered ballot box procedure. These are questions that will come up in the weeks and months ahead, and the prime question really as well is whether Emerson Mnangagwa is the person who is able to deliver on this particular kind of process.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to the ANC in South Africa momentarily. The other question I have for you, and this is, I think, a kind of also just a broader media frame question. When we talk in Western media coverage about a situation like the one happening in Zimbabwe right now, the kind of most surface layer coverage, which, I mean, there's a certain basic truth to, which is that there's a leader who, even in the most sympathetic reading, has been, dictatorial, committed extreme human rights abuses, has led his country to economic failure, reduced life expectancy. And so even in the context of him being a founding father and him leading a very important liberation struggle, it's pretty objective and obvious what his record ended up being. So there's one notion that, like, okay, we've gotten rid of one bad guy. And then the much more sophisticated analysis, and obviously one that you're providing and expanding on, is that this happens in a much broader institutional context. So just removing Mugabe or ensuring that his wife won't inherit power, as an example, does not answer all of the pressing questions from a legal, democratic, or procedural sense. I want to add to that economy, not just as a question of mismanagement, but also a question of delivery and design. Many of these liberation struggles promise some form of essentially, at least a kind of democratic socialism, by which they usually meant kind of broad-based delivery and needed redistribution as a result of exiting an apartheid situation or a colonialist situation. And obviously, Mugabe set up a much more sort of, maybe a crony capitalist system would be a good way of describing it. Do you have a sense when you hear about the reform pushes in Zimbabwe or what's needed for Zimbabwe and even the debates inside the party, that there is a sense of this democratic opening that you're talking about, but also one that would include some real re-engaging with conversations about serious wealth redistribution? And by the way, not just sort of tips to populism like Mugabe did by reclaiming farms, several years ago.
Yes, indeed. And in order to answer that, I just want to briefly take us back to early 1980s. It is impossible to describe the sense of liberation and jubilation that was in Zimbabwe when Robert Mugabe came to power, when Salisbury was no more, when Harare came into being. It was the great African liberation struggle. It was the beginning of the process of the final severing of the fetters of colonialism. You cannot overestimate or tell how much there was a true sense of liberation at that particular time.
Yeah.
But then almost immediately, the greatest resistance to Robert Mugabe in those very early powers of rule, and I was reporting there at that time, were actually from the veterans that he had fought with. They believed that he was not delivering. They believed that the quasi-socialism that they'd been fighting for was not being put in place. Instead, they were seeing that cynical state capital capture that was already happening even in the early times. Secondly, what you saw was a splintering of the liberation movements. People like Joshua Nkomo seen as a threat to the long-term power of Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe would utilize something like tribal division, the Shona and the Ndebele split, sending in the end his army into Ndebele land and massive slaughter, an operation incidentally conducted by Emmerson Mnangagwa.
Right.
But from that process onwards, what you have seen is a continual use of things like economy, of people's existence to prop up political power. Every time Mugabe was getting into political problems, he would bring something out of the box that would divert attention. As you mentioned, for example, the reclamation of white farms, which he said was insisted upon by the veterans. Well, no, the people who actually were sent out to reclaim the white farms were a different generation. They were a new generation. The veterans at that stage, those who'd survived the Mugabe purges, were basically fat cats within a Mugabe administration benefiting from the immense profits that were accruing. But at the same time as well, Robert Mugabe did not only operate inside the country, he operated outside. He courted the Chinese. The Chinese put massive amounts of money into developing infrastructure, many of which didn't go into an infrastructure, but instead went into those within the administration. He also had the great relationships with big capital. Tony O'Reilly was his closest friend, the founder of Heinz, was a very, very close friend. The two bonded by their fellow Catholicism. It was many, many strands that he used to maintain power. But the key point is that it wasn't about developing an economy. It wasn't about creating a new society out of the colonial past. It was actually about seeking ways in which to maintain power. The end was the maintenance of power, not the betterment of a society or working within any philosophical, economic, or social process. The end was quite simple. It was keep in power. And if you've got to keep in power, then you've got to keep those who keep you in power satisfied. That was the limit of the strategy. It was a very successful strategy. For nearly 4 decades it worked. But the question, once again, and I keep on coming up with the question, clearly it is a strategy that cannot continue. Maybe the people do have greater expectations. Maybe there is a dynamic that has emerged out of the removal of Mugabe that cannot be stopped. We have seen it in other societies where mini revolutions or post-revolutions start assuming a will of their own, and they do not need to be directed by the grand leader. That is once again the kind of cliche that those from outside kind of see Africa as a whole as a procession of old grand dictatorial leaders. Unfortunately, it's true in many cases, but at the same time, it's not a given that is the way it's always got to go. And that's again where Zimbabwe now is a template for the process of a proper change, not a change in terms of the way Western eyes would see it, in terms of perhaps ballot box processes, but in terms of the creation of a country that was promised during a liberation war, and whether the promise that was given to those who fought in that war and to their children who now live afterwards will be met. And that promise is belonging to a country in which everybody has equal rights, everybody has equal benefit, and everybody has an equal possibility of running governance at some stage.
Right. So then let's move to South Africa, and there's two different parts of it. I mean, on one hand, what is the historical contrast of the ANC? Because before we get to the kind of unflattering comparison or, the specifics of the troubles with Zuma, it seems to me that one of the great contrasts if we are to just personalize it, there's no comparison between a Robert Mugabe and the sort of just truly extraordinary leadership qualities of a Nelson Mandela. But also Nelson Mandela, if you look into the ANC even just a bit, and I know that few know more than you do, he was a giant among giants. This was a liberation struggle that had many different, extraordinary kind of iconic leaders in their own right, and even just also, younger figures who maybe weren't quite at that sort of status, but were, powerful and exceptional leaders and intellects like Thabo Mbeki or Ronnie Kasrils, these types of figures. It doesn't seem that Mugabe kind of allowed for that. So, I guess just maybe draw that more kind of historic contrast between the ANC and Zimbabwe first.
Well, the key issue is that the ANC waged a liberation struggle on the basis of non-racism, and it cannot be emphasized how important that was. The ANC looked very closely at what had happened in Zimbabwe in the early 80s and even during the guerrilla war. They noticed how the battles sometimes went into tribal lines. They noticed very clearly in the early 80s how Robert Mugabe's fallback was a tribal division. In order to continue maintaining his rule, yes, he did seek out and accentuate divisions between the country's two major tribes, the Shona and the Beli. The ANC recognized that. The whole basis of their liberation struggle had been one that was conducted on a non-racial basis, not only non-racial, but non-tribal. They realized the dangers that would happen. Subsequently, down the line within South Africa, the greatest threat to democracy was not seen as the white oppressor. It was actually seen as movements like Mangosuthu Buthelez's Inkatha movement, a Zulu-based tribal movement, which the ANC believed posed the greatest threat to the democratic process. It very nearly destroyed the democratic process. But if you're looking for parallels, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, very much the Robert Mugabe type figure, willing to use the tribal base to create a national power system, whereas the ANC at a particular time steadfastly fought against tribal division, seeing that as part of weakening their process. Particularly during the liberation struggle, the ANC fought on a basis of non-tribalism, non-racism, because they realized within that lay their greatest strength. Not only their greatest strength in terms of achieving liberation, but the greatest strength as well in defying a white-only government, which itself relied on racial base to maintain its power. So that is a basic difference between the process that we saw in Zimbabwe and the process that we saw in South Africa. But now we've got to a situation, 2017, where a presidential decision is being made in South Africa by the ruling party. They will elect the head of the ruling party, who is likely to become the next president of South Africa because the president comes from the ruling party. Who is one of the contenders? The ex-wife of the current president, Jacob Zuma, who's built his power very largely in recent times on a tribal Zulu base. His wife, also obviously Zulu, is a very remarkable person in many, many ways. But she at this stage is being propped up and supported, it seems, by those self-same systems of power structures that have kept Jacob Zuma in power through scandal after scandal, through corruption allegation after corruption allegation, through criminal charge after criminal charge. So all of a sudden, we do have a parallel starting, a parallel that those who worked with Mandela, worked under Mandela through a long period of time, regard with absolute horror, because they see it as a complete denial of everything they fought for throughout the liberation struggle, and have seen in the decades since South Africa's liberation as a weakening and a dilution of the very essence that brought liberation in the first place. So both countries on the brink. South Africa took note of what happened in early 1980s Zimbabwe. Let's see within coming months whether South Africa is taking note of what has happened in recent weeks within Zimbabwe and the demise of somebody who operated rather than in the interests of a strong national democratic base, in the interest of maintaining power by whatever means, through whatever corrupt practice. Once again, that will be a decision for South Africans to take, but they do have, and they see just in recent times, some kind of template, some kind of thing happening there that they are going to be dealing with in the months to come.
Final question. Is there a movement in South Africa, an insurgent labor movement, an anti-austerity student movement, or even just opposition inside the ANC? Is there some type of personality or movement that impulse can congeal around, or is that not there yet?
Well, that's where the similarity continues in a way. The African National Congress is such a iconic organization that the real opposition to the ANC, the ultimate opposition to the ANC, will have to come from within the ANC itself. Whether it is a splintering of the ANC and other groups emerge, or whether it is a viable opposition that emerges with elements of the ANC, these are questions that will be coming up and have been coming up for a period of time. One must remember, too, that the ANC is part of an alliance, the South African Communist Party, the COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions. This has been the traditional alliance in which the ANC has rested its power. Its allies are pulling away from what they had seen as the corruptness and the excesses of the Zuma-led administration. In a way, can the center hold? It seems doubtful. And that question will once again be answered in the weeks ahead. But the understanding of how the power comes about, the ANC itself is a remarkably democratic structure. It begins at grassroots level. People, representatives are elected at those grassroots. They then go through and they will be the ones voting in the National Convention that will elect the new leader of the ANC in next month, in fact, mid-December. Now, whether they are able to do so freely, whether they are able to do so without the interference of other factors, economic inducements, let me just say it, corrupt practices right. Among those above them, that's a key question. Perhaps it is the time they've seen what has happened in Zimbabwe. They see that the possibilities of getting rid of corrupt leadership is there, even though there are open questions about those who've taken over. But it's the process of change that is new to new democracies. New democracies have to deal with the shock of coming into power. Moving from a liberation organization to a government in power is something that is still not clearly understood. Decades on, people are still struggling with it, including those who are attempting to govern, including those who attempt to govern honestly.
Mike Hanna, I always appreciate your time immensely. Mike Hanna, of course, there'll be links to his Twitter and everything else. Al Jazeera, global correspondent, former CNN Jerusalem chief. Michael Brooks Show senior foreign correspondent. Mike Hanna, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Much appreciated. Okay, folks, we got to get to Jade in a minute, but basically it looks like some of the worst people on the internet are harassing Sam Cedar. And it's Sam's birthday today. So it's a very weird, it's weird timing. I hope I don't get harassed by troglodytes on my next birthday, but I guess it depends on how I time my next Sam Harris piece. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Matt, do you have an update on this?
It looks like Posobiec, I forget what his first name is, but found a tweet of Sam basically saying, and I don't have the tweet in front of me. Actually, I can pull it up here in a second. But it's a tweet from 2009 that people are calling a rape joke by Sam Cedar. But I think
Hello.
Here it is.
I have great rape material. Do you see?
Don't care, Ree Polanski, but I hope if my daughter is ever raped by an older, truly talented gentleman with a great but I hope if my daughter is ever raped, it is by an older, truly talented man with a great sense of mise-en-scene. Now, I don't think that's a rape joke, in my opinion. I think that's a joke about rape culture.
Specifically, that is.
It's an inversion of the "as a father, I care about rape and these issues" joke, and he just inverts both of those things for the purposes of that tweet.
He was also mocking. There was a lot of people who did the Roman Polanski's so talented. Who cares that he sodomized the 13-year-old, and we should let him come back into the United States? Even though he basically, my understanding of Polanski is he fled to Europe after being accused of raping a child. And so Sam is also mocking that idea that like, oh, well, he made Chinatown, so who cares?
Or he's coming clean.
Sorry, what?
I said, or Sam's coming clean.
Or Sam's So basically, these scumbags are trying to get Sam fired from MSNBC.
Or us thrown off TYT Network.
Us thrown off TYT Network. And basically, Sam was being totally sarcastic. Mike Cernovich, who's the other guy behind this, is mad because we've made fun of him on show. And what was the thing that Mike Cernovich wrote when he was doing the pickup shit? Didn't he write a column about... I'm not going to specifically say what it was, but all I could say is that Mike Cernovich has written some highly questionable things around things like consent. That's all. I'll just leave it at that. So basically, they searched in Sam's Twitter line. They went deep into history. They found a joke mocking rape culture and mocking people.
Well, they clearly just
Polanski.
did a search to see which of his tweets mentioned rape.
Exactly. They did that. And now they're trying to get him fired and thrown off of MSNBC. And these are the worst people in the world. They're totally disgusting. And it's interesting because we are, great social justice warriors, whatever the fuck that means. And apparently we're the ones who are we're freaked out about free speech and we don't get irony and humor. And somebody... And this is how much these people are awful that I have to take time into my show to defend my exploiter.
From literal-minded morons.
Yes, from literal-minded morons who are morons at best, disingenuous at worst, and really just some of the most disgusting people on the planet. And basically, they have done nothing. Nothing. I mean, I don't have all of the things about these two particular characters in front of me, so I'm not going to go into it from memory. But if you research either of them, these are two of the most loathsome, disgusting people available to current human experience. And they're going after somebody who has done more in a 15-minute span of work to fight against things like violence against women than these two have ever done in their entire lives. And in fact, perhaps they've been involved in maybe the opposite, I would speculate. They're disgusting. They're loathsome. And obviously, we'll have Sam's back, and I'm sure this will blow over. We're going to get to Jade Hoye in a few minutes. But first, speaking of loathsome, disgusting people and the need for gulags, so funny that it lines up with this new message from Maoist Bernie Sanders. Senator Bernie Sanders here. Greetings, comrades. I hope everyone is doing well and not indulging in the capitalist excesses of the post-Thanksgiving or Native American genocide holiday. See that? That was pretty friggin' woke. Now, speaking of woke, I would like to do this week's gulag list for the goals of my first term gulag that hopefully I will be implementing, in my opinion, if I am elected in 2020. First, Jade here of the New Republic, who wrote a whingy and weird column saying that because there are a bunch of rapists and abusers of women and creeps and freaks like Harvey Weinstein out there, that we should elect some type of centrist Wall Street mediocrity to the presidency to continue inequality and the environmental crisis, and not me. Jeet, you're a nice guy, but you clearly need to tap Maple for 6 months and clear your frickin' head. Now, two more people who need permanent gulag registry and also a new policy announcement. When I am president or chief commandante or chairman or whatever we are going to change the title to, we haven't determined that yet. That is going to be part of an Our Revolution survey that will be sent to your inbox probably 20 times a day, signed by Nina Turner. Jesus Christ, they go overboard with those goddamn emails. But that being said, that is to be determined. Now, I have fought passionately my entire life for universal single-payer health care, unlike many of the Democrats who have compromised, who have been willing to merely negotiate the rate of death and exploitation by the parasitic private insurance industry. And don't believe the pretenders, whether they be Cory Booker or anybody else coming along. Even Max Baucus is saying to look at nationalized health care, and that guy is literally a lobbyist embryo come to life mixed with alcohol. Jesus, these people, they all need to be in gulags. But anyways, here's the policy announcement. Universal health care for everybody except for Rand Paul and Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise doesn't get health care. The original job wasn't finished, and while I don't condone violence, I don't want to see that guy wheeling around having a full recovery thanks to government subsidies, many which are paid for by taxpayers who are gay, lesbian, and others, black, of communities that he would exploit. And Rand Paul, I mean, this goes without saying. This guy gets government insurance because he's so weak that his ribs can't even survive an attack from another frigging retired doctor. Jesus Christ, bourgeoisie society's out of control. Fuck Rand Paul, fuck Steve Scalise, no public health insurance for them. And since private insurance is going to be abolished, guess what? No health insurance. I'd also like to extend an offer to be head of Health and Human Services to the gentleman that attacked Rand Paul, whom I consider a hero. That is today's message. Onward to 2020. Jeet, grow up. I dig that music so much. Oh, no. No, I'm not. Yo, Jade, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Welcome back. Michael Brooks Show. The worst people on earth are after Sam Cedar. It's really annoying because I like to make fun of Sam. I just want to read this really briefly. David, this is a quote. Mike Cernovich apparently tweeted this in August 2012 rather. August 11, 2012. Have you guys ever tried raping a girl without using force? Try it. It's basically impossible. Date rape doesn't exist. Does not exist. So this motherfucker who is enraged at the world because of his speech impediment or whatever took a joke from 2009 mocking rape culture to try to destroy Sam. And that's what he was out actively promoting. These people are fucking disgusting. Now, I would like to introduce to you somebody who is the opposite of fucking disgusting. In fact, he's a friend of mine. Jesus. He is the producer of, we're gonna start smallest to highest. Mm-hmm. He produces Big Waz, Michael Brooks Show crew and comrade. He produces Waz Speaks. He is a fellow super producer, just like Matt Leck. There's a certain tension, kind of simian circling between these two, which you can feel in the air. He's also the Leverage the Chat founder. He is a co-host on the Basketball Friends podcast, which I listen to all the time, and he's formerly of ESPN. It's true, and I love how much I've been being mentioned. I feel like Trump. Jade Hoye. Jade, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Mike.
It's my pleasure to have you on, man.
Can I call you Mike or is it Michael?
You can call me what you feel. You're it's a very small group of people that call me Mike, but it works for you. I feel like it's a Connecticut thing.
We're New Englanders, right?
We're New Englanders. It's very New England. It's very like, I'm going on Mike's pod, dude. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about whether Kyrie has brain damage from eating soy, dude.
Man, Kyrie's just trolling. That's the
okay. Is that what's happening with Kyrie? Why is Kyrie Irving? I want to let everybody know because I always get some pushback for basketball and sports talk generally, but deal with it. Okay, yeah. He is killing it for the Celtics this year. Okay, he's totally emerged on his own. He's balling. He's balling. Mm-hmm. He's also become a vegan, and he's also super active on Twitter, which leads to like a bigger conversation about how he covers sports. But first of all, give an example of some of the things he's tweeting out and saying, and then explain why you think he's trolling.
Well, no, the thing that was the thing last year was he was saying that the earth was flat.
Right.
And that's problematic. I mean, even just from a conspiracy theorist, like myself, that I'm not with the flat earth thing. So, so he went about a year. I think he went for a year, and then this year, just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, claimed that he was just doing it to show how people kind of fall in line with, whatever he says is, doctrine, and it gets printed in the media and such. Mm-hmm. So
he's the rapper that started Flat Earth thing. Who was the rapper that put that?
B.O.B.
B.O.B. was the dude who put that out. And what was crazy about that was that B.O.B., and maybe we'll find it, put out an Earth is Flat track. Mm-hmm. And then what's his name? Who's the science guy?
Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson put out a response track, and it was really a problem from a branding point of view because B.O.B.'s song was so much better.
They go back and forth.
Crazy how much better B.O.B.'s rap. I mean, to be fair, it's like Tyson's science is better, B.O.B.'s rhymes are better.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, the other day, put out an image of the moon with an eclipse of the flat Earth and said flat Earth theorists had never seen this before. But yeah, I don't know. That's terrible.
I could see
B.O.B. the other day said that slavery didn't exist because he's never seen a slave ship.
Wait. Hold up. Is my board up?
No. Oh, wait. I don't know.
See how good a producer Jade is? He's so good. He's like, I don't know if your board's up. Should your board be up?
Well,
He
I'm
thinks he's
watching your show
producing
on
the
delay.
show.
That's why.
Okay, so, dude, wait a second. I did not hear that B.O.B. said this.
Yes.
What's B.O.B.'s explanation? And I can't wait to hear this track. Why does slavery not exist?
It's as simple as he's never America. What was it? Is 250 years old and slavery was 400 years. I don't know. Something about not seeing slave ships.
So he didn't. I didn't. So does he think that like anything ever happened?
I have no idea, dude. I just kind of let that go. But unfortunately, like he gives conspiracy theorists a bad name. You know, that kind of shit.
So we're gonna get to you. We're gonna get to your defense of the conspiracy brief in a second. I know you're itching to get there. You're itching.
Getting back to Kyrie though.
No, but this is the question I want to know. And then to tell me your bigger thoughts on Kyrie. But like, okay, I understand why B.O.B. needs to do this, right? Because B.O.B. is not like B.O.B. would not be mentioned on this show if not for saying that the earth was flat and slavery didn't exist, right? Like, there's no way he's in the zone. Kyrie is one of the best basketball players in the world. He's having an incredible season. Like, he's been part of really important teams. He's like, it's totally unnecessary. And I'm also just like,
he went to Duke.
He went to Duke, which, you know, whatever. It doesn't mean I don't care. One of my best friends went to Duke, so I would just like to take this opportunity to say Duke produces morons. No. But like, why does he need to do this? Like, what's the play here? He's already in the news. He's good. He doesn't need to troll.
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a side to Kyrie that's actually is that guy. I think that he probably did some learning and how stupid the flat earth thing was.
Right.
But like just recently, like he was questioning the moon landing, and that's something I can get with. You know what I mean?
All right. Before we get my last question though is because I know like you're actually I'm not going to blow up your spot like that, but I'm just saying you definitely had an experience of sports, and even like anybody pre-ubiquity of social media had an experience where you could follow athletes and have a feeling that they were kind of iconic. They were sort of a little bit removed. And now all of these guys, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're on Snapchat, they're constantly available. And they're usually like, I mean, some of them are more likable. I'm a LeBron defender. I like Steph Curry like everybody else does. I like what Kyrie's doing for the Celtics, even though he's ridiculous. But I guess it's like the whole, like, these guys are not, you can't put them on a pedestal anymore. And what's that like from because you actually cover and talk about these people professionally. Yeah. Like, do you prefer that they're not kind of like mystical, interesting, like removed hero figures anymore? Or do you like that, you know, they're like everybody else. They're like politicians, actors, whatever, and they all have been knocked off a pedestal, and they're all on Twitter, and they're all sounding like everybody sounds on Twitter, like morons.
I think the thing that people don't understand is how young they are. You know, I mean, especially with the basketball players, they're like 18, 19 years old, which is, you know, half my age, maybe. And so there's that. You know, the other thing is they're not obviously all the same. Like, you get a wide variety of different personalities, and you know, as they grow up and get older, they get more interesting, like anybody, honestly. But the thing that you have to also keep in mind is how much money. You know, they're not necessarily people as you interact with them, especially being, you know, from a sports media company like ESPN. You're really interacting with a brand, right? And so they're taught from a very, you know, the moment they get into the league, how to function as a brand, not as a person. So they're being told by their handlers how not to do all the interesting things you want them to do. You know what I mean? And so you kind of have to wait unless you get a very interesting dude. That's why Kyrie's interesting anyway. Right. The fact that he's even giving us this much is 90% more than you're getting from most of these athletes, because most of them just give you what they call game speak, you know. But, you know, when they leave the league, that's for like Steven Jackson, for instance, who's been on our show, is really, really interesting, and talks a lot about his background and the way he was brought up. So maybe you just have to wait until they get out of the NBA.
Right. So, I mean, so then, yeah, because there are guys who definitely they use their social media just like every other platform just to be like, yeah, I got to go out there, work out, play hard, got to train, got to play D. Thank God. God bless. That type of stuff.
There's definitely like,
Right.
players are becoming more woke, right?
But don't they have to be? Wouldn't they have to be woke, like to be in the contemporary, like just even, again, brand wise? Like, how can you play in the NBA space and not be woke, just even demographically?
You have to be. Yeah. I mean, it's part and parcel to being in the NBA now. It is the most socially conscious league. I think that's why I was drawn to it.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily an NBA like deep fan when I got into it. It just so happened that my skill set kind of aligned with the culture at ESPN. I mean, trust me, like the football culture is not where you want to be.
No.
So it's for me. It was like who smokes pot, here, and it was the NBA heads. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, so to speak. So
And also not so to speak.
quite literally.
Yeah, quite literally. Let me look. Even on a very amateur level, getting lit and playing basketball is a very unique experience. But I am curious. I mean, what? How did you sync up with B.O.B. and when did you first start thinking that slavery never happened?
Oh my God.
Am I going to get you in trouble with the Black Opinion Matters pod?
Nah, they love it. They love
do.
it, man.
Why do black people enjoy stupid white people behavior so much? That's a good question for the pod.
I mean, I think that I'm seen as authentic and honest, and listen, I was born and raised in New Britain, Connecticut, so
That's
I don't know
a particular vintage of white right there.
so there's I don't know.
Dude, make the case because on this show, obviously, I think that there's a ton of things that I wouldn't even call conspiracy theories, right? Like, did the CIA has the CIA and the United States instigated coups across the globe? Has there been relationships between intelligence agencies and drug traffickers and death squads? Is there corruption in the political process that allows Wall Street to own everything? Do the big internet service providers that are about to destroy net neutrality? Like, there's corruptions and conspiracies everywhere. But I've never been in the moon landing zone. Break it down for us. Bring the moon landing truth to the Michael Brooks Show. By the way, Anthony LaPay says hi. He
Nice.
is the founder of the Gorilla News Network, and he is a friend of mine.
Nice.
It's same dude.
I was actually doing a record for maybe a conspiracy show that I have in the works. I was talking about the moon landing, and for me, it's kind of a simple thing that has to do with what I do, which is take pictures and take video. And if you look at the images that came from Apollo 11, they were shot under very, very stressful conditions.
Right.
The cameras were mounted onto the chests of the astronauts. They had to do all types of calibrating and focusing and whatnot. And when you look at the imagery, and you can do this on government websites, you can look at, sequential imagery 1 to 1,000 because they didn't edit any of them. And they are all perfect shots. There's no, like anybody knows, you take a picture, you're going to have.
David, are you doing perfect shots for the Instagram like this right now?
You're going to have
good.
duds.
All right, yeah, good. Hey, okay, so I just want to say I'm going to bring super producer Matt in here in this conversation, and I am ambushing him a little bit, but as I said, there's already the tension between both of you being super producers, so there's already some of that. And I would say that Matt delves into the conspiracy universe, but maybe in a very different way than you. I'm not sure, actually. I mean, Matt, moon landing. What's going on? What's the response conflict right here?
I'm generally a believer that we went to the moon.
Okay, but what about the still photo theory that you're getting broken down with right now?
I think those sort of anomalies, I don't know. To be honest, I haven't really dug into them much. But I generally think that, like, when I have, it seems like there's explanations for it. And look, I'm not saying I 100% believe anything that our government says that was helpful to us in the Cold War. But I'm skeptical.
MBA comment right there.
I just think that
Pass the blunt.
There's a lot of there's a lot of I don't have my mic up for him. There's a lot of I don't know. That's probably enough for me.
All right, so guys, let's have a meeting of the minds on one thing. You guys are both JFK assassination aficionados.
Oh, nice.
What is, if you were to both give me and start with you, Jade, like, what's the thumbnail of the real thing that happened with JFK? I want to hear both of your guys' versions of the JFK assassination.
I fall in line, with the movie that was done by Oliver Stone and based on the book by Jim Garrison.
Right.
And, that there were elements within the government that were very unhappy with Kennedy in the direction that he was taking the country, specifically not to Vietnam. I think that he was coming around on the ideas of peace. He was back-channeling conversations through the Pope with Khrushchev. Mm-hmm. And he knew that the generals in the United States were crazy. I mean, they wanted to nuke Cuba during the missile crisis there. And he needed to go. He had fired pretty high-level people in the CIA. And so that's kind of it. I mean, if you read On the Trail of the Assassins by Jim Garrison, I'm right there.
Well, I am going to read it because you recommended this to me recently. I'm about to order that myself. Matt, JFK.
Yeah, I'm similar. Maybe one area of disagreement was I'm not so convinced that Oswald wasn't the shooter. I think he could have been, but I think like it's more interesting looking into this guy named Antonio Veciana, who was with this right-wing Cuban group Alpha 66.
Alpha 66.
Who he claims he saw Oswald with a guy named David Atlee Phillips, who I think was possibly he was in Guatemala. He's a CIA guy. And I think those sorts of connections are where it gets really interesting. But I generally think like the ballistic stuff, I think too much JFK assassination stuff gets bogged down in Dealey Plaza and ballistics that we frankly don't have good enough measurements on this stuff to be certain about after all these years. But going into, I think generally it was a Cold War, like we're pissed about Cuba, we need to, and I also like the argument that JFK was too pro sort of African national movements. He didn't want to intervene in as much of those. And I could see like
if
that
those bluesmen want to liberate their countries, we should let them do it, goddammit. And then they got killed, right? Like that one.
Yeah.
If the Duke Ellington of Congo wants to govern his own goddamn country, he ought to be able to, say.
Yeah.
That's not a bad Kennedy impression.
I'm not here to debate the merits of JFK assassination theories. No way did Oswald shoot the gun, though.
Boom.
There's absolutely no way.
Whoa.
I mean, if anything, he was on the second floor. I mean, he may have been on the street. And
I've seen those pictures too. Yeah.
And if you want to really get
Matt
complicated,
flexing.
if you want to get complicated, the Love Lady photo. There might have been more than one Oswald in Dealey Plaza that day.
So
and
I want you to break down. You told me this. I had not heard this one before because I'm very familiar. I think you guys are basically agreeing on the right-wing Cuban CIA mafia nexus, but I have not heard this one. Break this one down real quick, Jade.
Well, I mean, for going back into the beginnings of JFK research, assassination research, there were, I mean, even Garrison came across the impersonators. So leading up to the assassination, there were, instances of somebody claiming to be Oswald at a shooting range, saying, "I'm going to kill that Kennedy." It's in the movie. Another instance where there's an Oswald at a car dealership in which he takes the guy for a ride for a new car and it starts doing his thing about how the president's a communist and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So you have that. But more recently, there's a book by John Armstrong, a professor from a university, I can't remember now, worked for 10 years. The book is called Harvey and Lee. And essentially it details that there were two Lee Harvey Oswalds, one by the name of Lee, one by the name of Harvey. And they were being groomed by, some type of shadow government organization, as some say MK Ultra, from a very young age. I'm talking about elementary school. And he uses primary documents and, notably like the Warren Commission documents and the volumes, 26 volumes, Warren Commission, to demonstrate that there is a Oswald in Japan, and at the same time there's an Oswald in California. And he just details this, chronology all the way into Dallas and Dealey Plaza the day of the assassination, all the way till the theater. Like, apparently, according to his book, the two Oswalds were both in the theater that Oswald was apprehended at.
It sounds like a good. I like the script.
It's an amazing. Actually,
that's crazy.
It would be an amazing series for a television show.
No, for real. That would be a really interesting series. Matt.
Jay, did you have a opinion on the Ted Cruz Lee Harvey Oswald story?
Yes, this is the best one.
I didn't.
Ted Cruz's dad, of course, Donald Trump implied that Ted Cruz's dad was involved in killing JFK, which, okay, can we just, this is these moments, and I know this is a very low prior to me, but these are the moments where I think in the interest of honesty, we need to give Trump props. He basically insulted Ted Cruz's wife, implied that his dad was involved in assassinating Kennedy, and still was like, waiting for my endorsement, Ted. Mm-hmm. That is that's some real dominance right there. You don't have any. Okay, but dude, I'm not the conspiracy. Like, between you two guys, you're much better than I am in this stuff. But I have to say, and Matt and I have had this conversation many times, I don't think that Ted Cruz's dad was involved in assassinating JFK. But at the same time, like, former Castro Cuban turned born again Christian in Texas, involved in the oil industry. That guy wasn't connected to the CIA? Give me a break. Of course he was.
George Bush Sr. is been said to have been in Dallas at the time.
Yeah, Nixon was there just before. I mean, that's my theory about Ted Cruz's dad, is that I don't think he was actually in New Orleans, but I think Roger Stone knows that Ted Cruz's dad was in the CIA, and that he was probably, maybe in Miami, in Florida, or doing something CIA related in the 60s. So you say he was involved
CIA related, like cheating on your mother again, dead.
So you publicly say that he's involved with Oswald, making him have to come up with some sort of story of what he was doing at the time, which he hasn't.
Right.
I mean, Dallas was only one of a handful of cities that the operation could have taken place. Chicago was on the list. Miami was also on the list.
With those corner shot, I've seen that too. There was Miami, there was, and in Chicago, you're right. There were worries that there were other people up in on the parade route or whatever, waiting to get a pop at him.
Jade.
Right, and so there were other quote Oswalds in those cities, right? There were other whatever you want to call those, agent provocateurs. There was one in Miami ready to go, so.
I'm going to read, I want to definitely read the Garrison book for sure. I got to ask you, I want to do a couple minutes on sneakers, but I got to ask you, I mean, do you think, Sam always says, and I like this quote, that if Alex Jones didn't exist, the CIA would need to create him. Because, because there's this way in which, some conspiracies, the problem with them, in my opinion, is that they're used to disincentivize people being involved in politics, because it's like, fuck it. It's all this hidden script. What's the point? And I think the point is that there's a lot of corruption and criminality and injustice and inequality, and we still have to, do something about it to the extent we can, right? Like, regardless. Alex Jones seems like, in addition to pushing a lot of stuff that we don't even, we don't need to get into the specifics, but I think obviously just a lot of obvious total garbage and crap and nonsense. But he's actually I mean, now he's just basically a mouthpiece of the status quo under Trump. He's like Pravda of Trump. But, you know, he's actually disincentivizing people from really learning about anything. And I'm just wondering, like, as a conspiracy theory aficionado, was Alex Jones ever different? And did he always suck? And what do you think the deal is? Like, do you think he does? Like, what do you think? Like, what do you think? Where does he fit into this? I know you're not a fan of his.
I mean, he's been around for many years, and you know, I remember him. I want to say that he was definitely around prior to 9/11.
Right.
I think he was, and he did some pretty.
David's from Austin. So you're familiar. He's been around since like the late 90s, right?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say the first thing. I mean, back then there weren't many outlets for that type of information, you know, and so it was kind of like you had to listen to it if you were interested in the subjects. He did some pretty interesting work on the Oklahoma City bombing. I remember he did a documentary on that. I don't think it was that great, but he did feature the lawyer for Timothy McVeigh. I think his name was Stephen Jones, who wrote a pretty interesting book, honest to God. And so he's become, you know, what he's become over the last 5-6 years.
Race baiting, right wing.
Yeah, it's the gun thing. This, you know, and the pills you got to buy in the tents.
Right.
I don't know. Listen, like a lot of this for me is entertainment, right? And it's like in basketball, you know, people discredit advanced statistics. But it's just like if you're a smart person, you go, hey, I'm going to check that out and weigh that against the way I watch the game. I feel the same way with some of this stuff. It's like I could watch it. I can check it out. I'm not going to attach myself to it emotionally or, you know, it's not what I believe in.
Well, that's why you're a happy, well-adjusted super producer.
But yeah, he's I don't know. I mean, listen, the JFK community, the research community, is full of just smart, intelligent people.
Right.
And, you know, I listen a lot to a website called Black Op Radio with Leno Sanik, and he highlights some of the brightest minds in that world.
Hey,
and,
Matt, can you edit this out in the post-production? Thank you.
And it's been going on for years, you know. I mean,
let's talk sneakers for a minute.
Sure.
There's a sneaker show for Leverage the Chat. Do you parallel the resurgence? Like, I don't touch Nike. That goes back to, like, I mean, and this isn't specific to Nike, but I got my awareness of the sweatshop issue through Nike when I was a teenager, so I made a decision to never buy a pair of Nikes again, and I've stuck to that. I don't think that there's any, you know, I think they're all bad when it comes to that issue, and they're all actually brands more than production companies. But do you think this resurgence of Adidas and Puma and that kind of 70s aesthetic you could track with like the same kind of wokeness that we're talking about in the broader NBA and that particular kind of style?
I feel like this is one example of something that I come across a lot with my friends who happen to be often like 10 years younger than me now.
Right.
My group of people that I work with. And I feel the same way. I was like, whatever happened to that whole Nike pays their workers 5 cents an hour thing?
Right.
You know, our culture that I'm part of wholeheartedly celebrates these materials that are coming from overseas and in China, and who knows how they're made. It doesn't seem to matter.
Doesn't seem to matter, right?
I think about it. I hope that, you know, along the way, just haven't had time that their practices have changed. Have they not?
They haven't really changed, but it's very interesting that, and again, like a company like Nike, you know, they just subcontract to all these factories anyways. It's not exactly like they are using abusive labor, I'm sure, continues to this day. But
I mean,
you know, they're not. They
Apple?
don't own. Yeah, they all do, and they aren't. They aren't actually owning. You know, these factories are middlemen. And essentially like, you know, Nike's literally a brand company. But I think it is interesting that like now on one hand, you know, Nike needs to put out commercials as an example that totally acknowledge the broader environment of things like Black Lives Matter and, and sort of more conscious kind of speaking out. It's still definitely not connected in the supply chain. But I do think, like, style-wise and statement-wise, that we always say, like, there's no sidelines for these sneaker brands anymore. They got to pick a side in these fights, and they're clearly coming down on, like, the side of, the not Trump, the multiracial, the justice-oriented America, and that's a brand decision.
Well, I mean, at least with the NBA, you're
right.
I mean, I don't know what percentage we're talking about, but it is an African American league,
right?
And quite frankly, I mean, NBA is more or less the side project to what is a sneaker game, right? And
explain that.
I mean, there's just so much money now that controls the league, controls players. In fact, I mean, that's why Kyrie is now a Celtic.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, he needed to get out of the shadow of LeBron to, enhance his sneaker brand. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so Ethan Strauss, a good friend of ours who used to be part of our show, has written about this extensively with the battle between Nike and Under Armour when it came to getting Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. So I would check that out. But yeah, I mean, talking about millions and millions of dollars, billions,
And then at the same time, we find, it looks like Sports Authority is going to go under. Foot Locker and all these other things are consolidating. Dick's is in danger. So the same model. I mean, like, is this just like people just?
Go ahead. But the distribution centers are in danger only because I would imagine,
online.
Like Amazon.
Yeah, it's online. It's the same thing. It's a barbell economy all over again. This time just for sneakers, right? Like it works for people at the very, very top of the supply chain and income distribution, and then there's kind of like cheap outlets for. But it cuts out all that kind of middleman space. I mean, how relevant were those places to this system? It doesn't really matter that they're going under from a kind of right from the sort of perspective of NBA.
I was just looking in preparation for the show that 70% of Champs and Foot Locker is Nike. So essentially, they're just Nike stores, right?
Right.
And I just recently found myself in a conundrum because I've been looking for a certain pair of shoes, and so what do? I go to Foot Locker. They don't have the shoe, and then I go to Champs to look, thinking that they're separate companies. And I just innocently tweeted out that I said I'm starting to think that Foot Locker and Champs are the same company. Well, it turns out they are the same company.
That's like the whole story of modern capitalism right there. Turns out they are the same company.
Yeah, because when I go to both stores are at my mall, and for like the last 3 or 4 years, I've been going to these stores thinking I'm going to get a better deal at the other one. I bet you the other store has a better deal. The whole time it's the same shoe, the same price. And I'm like, fuck, this is really weird. You know what I'm saying?
No, but that's like every part of these is duopolies. And I just wonder, like, now obviously, like in all these other sectors, Amazon and the online model is going to kill, there's room in the future for boutiques. There's room in the future for, like, I'm a sneakerhead and I'm able to get good real estate in a trendy place and create like a sneaker experience or whatever bullshit we're calling it. But like an actual like boutique store, same way that there might be some room for independent booksellers. But then on the other hand, everything is just like slash and burn Amazon retail. And so everything from, Champs to like, Barnes and Noble, all those models are dead. People are going to lose jobs, which really matters. And then the other part is like, what happens when it's the same thing for everything else? When Amazon has killed everything, where do the prices on our Pumas go then, Jade?
I don't know. I mean, All I know is we have an Amazon near my house now, an Amazon
A
warehouse.
store. Oh, a warehouse. Yeah.
And it looks like what it would be used as a future prison when they start herding us all together.
See, this is where I buy Alex Jones stuff. Not because it's a conspiracy, but because just this is where the logic of capitalism heads. It's not a planned process. It's an organic process. But that's getting super fucking pretentious.
It's highly guarded. It's a scary sight, honestly.
Yeah.
It's way off the road too. It's like a mile deep off the main road, and you just see it there, and you see the security vehicles, and it's once they start flying drones from this facility, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Which is just it's going to happen, right?
Of course, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I'll be getting my shoes in 20 minutes.
And I'll be getting my shoes in 20 minutes. You should be getting a plot of land up in Vermont and growing vegetables. What you should be doing. That's what we should all be doing.
I mean, for me with the shoes, listen, it's the one thing that I don't know. It's a weird thing. I feel good.
What are the shoes that you're looking for? Do you not want to blow up your spot there?
Right now I'm into Adidas.
Right.
So there's
Which
two
line?
There's two shoes. I'm into the Anikis.
Yeah.
And I'm also into the NMDs because I really like the Ultra Boost.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little bit older, so they're very, very comfortable. I was a Nike person. I was kind of swayed by Amin Al Hassan, who's a colleague of mine.
What a dear young brother.
Yeah, as being like the cool dad shoe, the Air Max 90. But with the show that we've developed for the network, which is called Nice Kicks, I've just gotten into different shoes because these guys are, it's an interesting culture.
Look at Amin throwing off secrets of the black dad to the white devil producer. Pathetic.
Yeah,
you tell Amin that when that Amazon facility turns into a Nation of Islam and prison complex, his sellout, fake, give the white man our sneaker secrets ass is going.
Yeah.
Fuck out of here, Amin.
Oh, man.
You got a whole stable of them. Waz, all the rest of them, they're ready to just take your paycheck. And Black Trey thinks he's all edgy because of his name on Twitter. Takes the same devil's paycheck. Fuck all of them. Allahu Akbar.
Right. No, I do think about that though. It's funny you bring that. It's nice to speak to someone like you because I don't get to hear that much.
Like Nation of Islam Obama, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But just about the means of production and how these things are made. What are we buying here? I'm really just buying some type of weird extension of being like Kanye West. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's true. I mean, look, I think it's important because I think the problem is that the left, if I get on a soapbox, like things got way too focused on things like personal purchasing decisions and personal morality. And the reality is like, look, if we're living in this society, we're all going to be involved in supply chains that are exploitative and like everything from sweatshops to the fact that the whole world runs on oil, which is literally suffocating the planet, right? So I think that people should, and also in culture is cool and sneakers are dope and people should, do their thing. I don't think it's kind of about personal morality in a certain way, but on the other hand, I think it's crazy the extent to which we could have all of these conversations and all of this attention paid in all of these fields of human endeavor, and we don't even stop for a second to be like, at the very least pressuring, Nike and Adidas and Gap and whoever else. You guys are still making these clothes, and not to mention, H&M, that's a nightmare, in these incredibly exploitative conditions. And then, not looking at it as a morality tale, but looking at it in that's just if we design our economy this way, a lot of people are going to get eaten up and destroyed by it. And we should try to minimize our own personal footprint as much as possible. But ultimately, these are structural things. They're not about like my idealistic 13-year-old decision not to buy Nikes anymore. I mean, I think that's great, but that's just not how these things are solved. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me make a note on that. My giant iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. Made from one of the most exploitive supply chains on the planet, starting in the Congo. Well, dude, Jade, we got to do this again soon. I know we're cooking up some stuff, actually, some more Leverage the Trat Michael Brooks show crossover stuff, which is gonna be coming in the future, which I'm pretty excited about.
Will this appearance? What's the likelihood I land on a government list after this show?
I think if you weren't already on there just based on your search history, and in fact, Waz and I will do a segment where we compare our search histories. Mine will be heavy on Jamaican liberation. His will be heavy on porn. And we will do those comparisons. No, but dude, I think you're already on a list.
Yeah, probably.
I think at this point, if you are not on a list, you're just not. What kind of self-respect can you have?
Mm-hmm.
You live in Trump's America, for Christ's sake. You're not on a list.
I just don't judge me, people. Don't judge me, okay?
Only JFK conspiracy theorists can judge you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got to put in the work. Jade Hoye, founder of Leverage the Chat, my comrade, the Michael Brooks Show resident conspiracy theorist.
There you go.
Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks, boss. Is this still going on with Sam? I haven't been paying attention. Can someone look up something on this Jack Posobiec guy? I think that there's something else that I wanted. Was he involved in something with Roy Moore?
Oh, yeah, he doxed one of the accusers.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that Mike Cernovich, I read his tweet about rape earlier, and Jack Posobiec doxed one of Roy Moore's accusers and is for some mysterious, incomprehensible reason is still on Twitter. And these are the people who are taking a ironic joke, because they're literalist troglodytes from 2009 mocking people defending Roman Polanski and rape culture to try to destroy someone's career who has done more to fight rape and violence against women than they ever will in their lives, unless they spent the rest of their lives off of social media personally apologizing to random women they see in the street. They're fucking grotesque scumbags. And speaking of grotesque scumbags and how to cover them, let's get to tonight's pyramid. As many of you may know, there was a piece in the New York Times that ran last week. And it was a profile of a guy named Tony Hoye. And apparently that's not the guy's real name. Tony is the founder of a fascist party called the American Workers' Party, and the New York Times sent out a reporter by the name of excuse me, I've lost it. What is his name? A reporter by the name of Richard Fawcett to go cover him and find out what makes him tick. Now, look, there's only one way of covering these people fundamentally. There was a recent piece in The Atlantic which profiled the guy that covered the Daily Stormer, and they revealed that, of course, he's a grotesque creep who needs some sense of success and status and is obviously someone who's enormously disturbed, and this is the outlet. There's no other way fundamentally of understanding these people and their grotesque viewpoints without that. We can't romanticize them as for some godforsaken reason people like even Mother Jones did in profiling Richard Spencer and his doofus face. There's no reason to romanticize them. There's no reason to play into their scam either and make them seem dangerous and intimidating. But the other thing that you shouldn't do is do what Richard Fawcett did, which was say that this guy, Tony Hoye, was a big fan of muffins, that he had really nice, he was really polite, someone you could bring around your mother. Basically be like, besides the fact that this guy's into like Hitler and is overtly calling for racial separation and fascism, he's super nice. And we should do a lot of comments on the fact that he has a fucking hipster beard as if this is somehow a distinguishing trait in today's world. A lot of assholes have hipster beards. Spend some time in Brooklyn. It was a pathetic, disgusting, trivializing profile that many people have called Richard Fawcett out on, and really the whole enterprise of the New York Times. What is so difficult about covering people that embrace these kinds of politics as the grotesque emotional degenerates that they are, whether they be Donald Trump or the head of the American Workers' Party, the Traditionalist Workers' Party, whatever the fuck it's called. Richard Fawcett went to Ohio to gain understanding and came back and made all of our national discourse more pretentious, more stupid, and more facilitative of the worst of us, people who joke about and pine for a Hitlerian America. It's disgusting. It's pathetic. And that's why Richard Faust is going in this week's Pyramid. Look at those credulous eyes. Oh, you read Hitler? That's so weird. I read Kurt Anderson. Oh, you listen to Aryan podcast? That's so funny. I like This American Life.
Just a media note, it's as much Fawcett's fault as the editorial staff of the New York Times,
Fair
who
enough.
drop the ball on this shit all the time. Like, you should have somebody who this is their thing, right?
Right.
Like, especially now, like, it's clear that this is going to be a problem that we're going to be dealing with. You need to cover it better.
Yeah, how about maybe you hire somebody like the great Corey Pine, who actually understands these things, who's actually established links between alt-right internet writers and an incredibly dangerous billionaire. As an example.
I would subscribe to the New York Times if they hired Corey
If they
Pine.
hired Corey Pine, I would subscribe to the New York Times immediately. But I guess Corey Pine, not being a addled, naive trust fund baby who will reinforce all of their ridiculous tropes, is not at the top of their list. Why don't you hire somebody who actually understands, I don't know, the dangers of neo-Nazism and neo-fascism to cover that beat? I think almost anybody with basic cognitive capacity could observe that guy also liked muffins. Really deep stuff there. Like the profile that started on Richard Spencer that started by focusing on the fact that he was eating a meal with chopsticks at an Asian restaurant. Brilliant stuff. I get it, because there's an irony, because he's a racial separatist, but he likes food from Asia. That's that kind of really brilliant human insight that distills the essence of these people whose worldview inevitably leads to a neo-genocidal politics. Really, really fucking brilliant. You should totally ignore people who know what they're talking about. Folks, become a patron of the show today. We're growing every day. You're spreading the word. I appreciate all of you immensely. At the $8 level, you get the full show content and access to the Discord, which is really a 24/7 community that is growing and evolving. At the 21 and above level, there are twice monthly conference calls with me and training programs and training calls where we have one in the works with Luke Mayville, who's a friend of mine. He's an academic now based at Columbia and who's also done some grassroots organizing in Idaho, which is his native state. David Grishcom and I are working on one related to the theory reading that we publish once a week for patrons. There's a lot in the works. When we get to 1,000 patrons, we're going to hire somebody to do a little bit of animation on the characters, and it will grow, sustain us, and help us develop to the next levels of what we want to do. After we reach 1,000, the next stretch goal, of course, is going to be 5,000. But when we hit that first 1K and sustain us, it's going to make an enormous difference. I want to thank each and every one of you so much. Really spend time on the Patreon. Look around. Keep spreading the word. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thank each and every one of you so much. I want to thank super producer Matt Leck, super producer David Slavic, David Grishcom, writer, researcher, resident, intellectual. Each and every one of you, I appreciate it. In the post-game, we're talking about Leslie Lee III from Struggle Session. I want to thank Mike Hanna and Jade Hoye. Questions coming in from the Discord, and then we'll turn on the phones, 646-257-3920. And we'll turn on the M's. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Left is best.